Hello, everyone. Fairly momentous day in the world of tennis. And if you don't know by now, you must have been under a rock for the last 6 hours. But let's hear from Roger in his own words what he had to say earlier today.
To my tennis family and beyond. Of all the gifts that tennis has given me over the years, the greatest, without a doubt, has been the people I've met along the way. My friends, my competitors, and most of all the fans who give the sport its life.
So we all know what comes next. But as he said there, it's about the fans, which has given the sport life in his words.
Met along the way.
Here we go, one more time.
My friends, my competitors, and most of all the fans who give the sport its life.
And he talked, listen, I think it was a great retirement statement. I love the way it's done. And I think it speaks to many of us. I'll come to you first, Nick. What were your thoughts as somebody who grew up as a fan?
Well, I will be honest, John. My initial thoughts when I first heard the statement were, okay, it's happened. Like, it's finally happened, because I've been building up for this for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Definitely since that first knee surgery in beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
We knew he was getting on a bit. We knew he was late 30s. It was kind of becoming inevitable. He hadn't looked. He'd somehow dragged himself to an Australian Open semi-final, and still managed to put up a decent showing against Djokovic, even though he wasn't really that competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had the other surgery after losing to Hurkacz at Wimbledon 21. He was looking fairly promising on his comeback, but there was clearly still some issues. And I knew that if we saw him playing again, it would be for probably the last time, or very close to the last time. The way that the announcement that Laver Cup next week would be his last was the thing that caught me off guard.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting it to end now. And that was more what I had to process more than anything else, because in my head, he was almost done.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jamie, we're here to talk about it from a tennis fan's perspective. You, of course, have seen Mr. Federer in the flesh play tennis on a few occasions in a couple of not very important matches, right?
Yeah, I've seen what we were talking about last time. I've seen Federer and Nadal play each other 4 times. So I've got.
And they weren't exhibitions, Laver Cups, first rounds at an ATP 250.
Yeah, exactly. So I saw the 07 final, the 08 final, and then the 2 semi-finals in 2019 as well, which were French and Wimbledon back to back.
It's the Wimbledon one I forget, actually. I was with you that day, and I think we both got to see the second semi-final between Djokovic and Thiem, but only you got to see the first one. I think really the focus, therefore, at least for today, really should be on the 08 final. And from the fans' perspective, I guess that's your strongest memory of Roger, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely one of the strongest for sure. I just remember there was kind of there was such a. I mean, obviously they had played each other, hadn't they, 2 years before in 06 and in 07.
Mm-hmm, at Wimbledon, yeah.
Exactly, at Wimbledon, yeah. But there was a sort of particularly kind of particular sense of anticipation, I would say, about that 08 final. Perhaps because kind of Nadal had, absolutely destroyed Federer, I guess, in the final of the French a few weeks previous. And there was a sense, I think, that perhaps Federer was, kind of maybe getting further and further away from Nadal on clay, but that maybe the opposite was true on grass, that Nadal was maybe getting closer and closer to Federer. Mm-hmm. So there was a kind of a real anticipation that, it could be an absolute classic. And of course, that's what happened. But yeah, it was a great match, and it was kind of everything kind of came together, I think, to make it such a great occasion as well.
Yeah, I mean that final itself, of course. I'm sure maybe Nick's got some thoughts on it as well. The way the way Roger gets back into the match is what makes it. I mean, it could easily have been straight sets or certainly 4 sets to Rafa, but of course he's match point down, Nick, or championship point down, and what does he do? Jamie,
He,
you'll have to help us here. I know what he does. Go on, Jamie.
yeah,
Tell us. I'll come back.
I am sorry about the Wimbledon 2008 final. There were reasons why Jamie will remember it clearer than me.
Go on, Jamie. Tell me what he does when his championship point down. So this is in the 4th set tiebreaker. Rafa Nadal has, I think, his first or second I think it's his first championship point, maybe second. But what does he do at this point, Jamie?
Yeah, he hits an incredible backhand winner straight down the line past Rafa. Yeah, backhand winner. Exactly.
And he goes on to win the set and obviously make it the match. I mean, if Rafa, I mean, he'll probably even the great Roger Federer probably would get that shot wrong 8 times out of 10. I would suggest in some way, shape, or form. Probably lose the point as well 9 times out of 10. Let's say this, but the fact that he kept the 1 out of 10 to be that day and in that moment made it even more special, and it's what made that final special. Nick, tell me about you. You know, what first brought Roger Federer to your attention as a tennis fan?
Wimbledon. Wimbledon brought my attention to Roger Federer because you couldn't avoid him at Wimbledon. When I grew up in a tennis household. Mum always watched Wimbledon every year. We didn't watch any other tournaments. Like we didn't really know, like we didn't have access to other tournaments back in those days. It's not like, but in the 2000s, it was like, I don't know what you could watch the tour on or the other slams, but it was pay-per-view subscription, and Wimbledon was free and it was always on. By sort of being in a room and in the room when tennis was on, you couldn't avoid Roger Federer. He's the king of Wimbledon. He was winning it all the time in sort of the mid 2000s. Which during that sort of like, I suspect I don't want to sort of make you guys feel old, but like that's sort of my early teen years. Sort of, I was 14 in the 2008 final, so half my life.
How old were you, Jamie, for that final?
17.
17.
Okay, so a little bit. Okay, so we're about
I was a couple of years older.
Excellent. Okay. So for me, Federer was just there, and I guess for me, I knew the name. I kind of dipped in it. I wasn't very good at paying attention to matches, but I knew when I watched Roger Federer that there was something special about his game. The single-handed backhand, which was still a minority of players use and can make work, was different. His movement. Everything about his game seemed so smooth and not effortless, but easy. And I just thought he was the coolest tennis player I've ever seen. And I think for me, when I knew when I was a fan, when I watched the Wimbledon 2007 final, and it was against Rafa again, and I was rooting for Roger Federer. Roger Federer is the first tennis player I've ever rooted for.
I know I'm a really good point. Yeah,
and I know I'm talking to a Rafael Nadal fan here.
It's okay. We're cousins.
But let's face it, if we both watched that match at the time, I would have been heavily rooting for Roger, and you would have been heavily rooting for Rafa, I suspect. We probably shouldn't have watched the same room.
I was by 2008, but as Jamie alluded to off air beforehand, I remember watching the French Open finals of 06 and 07, and kind of wanting maybe this. By this time, I hadn't really. It was probably 08 really, and 09, and seeing Rafa get the better of Roger that sort of made me sit up and take notice of Rafa, and my support for him probably began around about then, if I'm frank. And in fact, the 06-07 French Open finals, I remember not strongly rooting for. And by the way, like you, Nick, I'm just listening to those French Open finals on the radio because they weren't on terrestrial TV, and not to the best of my knowledge. I remember watching or listening to them on the radio and hoping that Roger would make a match of it, and actually hoping, oh, I just want Roger to win one French and then we can all move on. And of course, he did eventually do it, albeit in 2009. Listen, I'm glad we're talking about the rivalry, because between all the rivalry and friendship, obviously Rafa tweeted today. I won't show you that tweet right now, but I'm actually going to show you a funny little exchange, if you can let me just indulge for a few minutes, while perhaps you can both maybe think of some either Roger Rafa anecdotes, maybe even Djokovic anecdotes related to Roger, or just some of the times that you watched him play. But I'm just going to play this little video in the meantime. Can we see this video, by the way, as I press play on it?
No.
You
Not
can't
now.
see it right now. Okay, just a second. What about now? Can you see it now?
No.
All right, let me try. Oh, I know why, because I'm not sharing the screen. Let's go now. How about now?
Yeah.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool. Can you see it still?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Here we go. I'm just going to play this to the watching world, and then we'll come back to you two for some sort of final thoughts and anecdotes, and even maybe this little friendship or bromance.
It's going to be good, I tell you. All right, shall we just try it? Yeah. All right, 3, 2, 1, go. So, Rafa, do you know what you're going to give me for Christmas yet?
You know what? I'm gonna come to Switzerland and play an exhibition match for your foundation.
So, Rafa, do you... He looks at me, God. Okay, here we go. So, Rafa... Okay. So, Rafa... But, sorry, tell me again, how do I start? Is it just like, Rafa, what are you going to give me for Christmas? Like,
Yeah, you're going to say, Rafa, do you have an idea of what you're going to get me for Christmas?
that's how it starts, right?
Yes.
Okay,
And then
perfect.
Rafa's going to say, I don't know, how about I come play your an exhibition for you in Switzerland for your foundation?
Oh, perfect, that's cool.
And then Rafa will say to you, what are you going to get me, Roger?
Yeah.
And then
What
you're
are
gonna say,
you
going to get me?
What do you get?
What are you gonna get?
What are you going to get me?
You know what you're going to give me for Christmas yet? Or no?
You know what? I'm gonna play an exhibition. Estaba mal, ¿o qué?
Guys, I've indulged a little bit there, but have you seen that before, Nick?
Yeah, I've seen clips of it. I mean, look, let's face it. Roger was the one struggling to keep a straight face there, right?
Yeah.
Rafa was endlessly professional. It's Roger who's messing around.
By the way, Nick, I want to touch on this because I think it's also a part of what makes him quite endearing from a fan's perspective. Is he could be a bit goofy, couldn't he, at times? And he was so serene and so special on the court, and yet off the court, you know, you could hear him giggling sometimes. And when he's on the on-court interview, whether it be with Jim Courier or in this little moment here, and I don't know, I thought that was quite an endearing part of his character.
Yeah, I don't think he took himself that seriously. I mean, obviously, a big part of his brand was that he was the greatest of all time, and for a long time he was, because the others were still trying to catch him.
Right.
It didn't really come into question until a couple of years. Back. His personality was very much someone. Yeah, he was willing to have a laugh and a joke on the court or off the court. I think one of the things that I remember was, sort of the tricks he would do with like trying to serve. I think there was a commercial they made where he served a tennis ball can off someone's head.
Yes, good memory, Nick. Yeah, he does. I think
it looked like he had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, right. I agree. He had an emotional side too, a softer side, if you like, Jamie. I mean, We did see him get quite teary and quite emotional. Of course, when he talked about his former coach who passed away, we touched upon him earlier in South Africa. I remember. Sorry, it was an Australian guy, but I think they met in South Africa. But also, of course, on the court as well, he could be quite tearful in 2009 when he lost the Aussie Open final, I think it was, and a couple of other times as well. So he wasn't afraid to show his emotion. I would say, apart from the moment when the umpire would say play to the game, set, match moment, that was probably the zone for him when he wouldn't show the emotions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of between kind of 03 and probably 08, 09, actually, when he was at his kind of winning peak, when he was sort of sweeping up, the slams. That was one of the reasons why I kind of struggled to connect with him as much, I would say, because there wasn't as much emotion, as you say, on the court, because he was winning so easily.
Yeah.
And it was almost, I found it at that point quite repetitive, but I think I only kind of really started to appreciate his greatness and his elegance on the court perhaps later on.
When compared
absolutely.
with Rafa and Novak.
Exactly. Yeah. Who could? Yeah.
Go on, Nick.
Yeah. It's you're saying about the emotion, actually, and like, sort of keeping it and sort of that sort of almost lack of it. There's these compilations on YouTube of all of Federer's championship points for his slams, or whatever. So I've definitely watched those a few times. But what's something that always struck me, like when observing any player, but like Roger would always, particularly even his early ones where you would think he won fairly easily, his celebrations were pretty explosive. Yeah. He was screaming. Rafa and Novak, half the time will do that, but half the time they'll just sort of fall flat on their back and sort of try and take in what they just did.
Yeah.
Everything just explodes out of Roger when he won.
The 03 Wimbledon, the first one in particular. I mean, he goes to his knees and he just, even though I think it was straight sets, it's a really good point, Nick.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think there's you were talking on your other show about his the fact that he was quite emotional on court and that he struggled to keep his temper. And I think, although he managed to manage his emotions, I think he just kept a lot of stuff bottled up on court. So it doesn't surprise me when it all just comes out fairly explosively. And maybe that's one of the reasons why people sort of endeared to him, is that when the job is done, he lets loose and he shows his human side.
Yeah, he knows how to relax. I mean, there was also a little thing with him very recently, just a few weeks ago. There was somebody in a restaurant somewhere in the world, I don't even know where it was, and they came up to him and they showed him that they had a tattoo of Federer. Have you both seen that? Jamie, you've seen it, right?
I've seen it. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, he comes up and he shows him the tattoo, doesn't he? And then he asks for a photo, and Federer's like, "Oh my God, who is this guy?" And I think he's not sure how to take him.
I think is it Roger's name and a face, or is it a picture of a tennis court on his face, or it's borderline scary, but I mean Roger's just funny as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's in a restaurant somewhere. I don't know why I get the impression it's in the US, but it might not be. But he just happens to be in this. Oh yeah, he just happened to be in the same restaurant as Roger Federer as well. I wonder how many years that took him to track him down. But I like and I think you're right, Nick. I think you raised a really good point about. I think he was in the zone for those 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours, particularly if it was against Rafa, on the court, and then the emotion would come immediately afterwards, sometimes in defeat, sometimes in victory. We mentioned some of the tears there. I think there were tears when he first won Wimbledon in 03. And you also mentioned some of those championship points. And for me, and this is to both of you, I actually find the most moving, for some reason, or sometimes perhaps obvious reasons, it's actually the 09 French Open. I touched on it earlier as well. Just knowing the years of hurt, if you like, that he had suffered at that tournament, often at the hands of a particular person from Mallorca. Finally, this time he had his chance. We touched upon the Tommy Haas win that he had the day after, I think it was, that Rafa went out. That was huge. And then there's the championship point against Söderling in the final. And I feel emotional for him, knowing what had gone before. I think you can see amongst his team as well. I mean, do you have any thoughts about Nick, about his relationship at the French Open?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know when the first time, because you mentioned listening to the French Open finals on the radio. I don't know when the first time you watched a French Open would have been. Round about sort of late 2000s, again as a teenager, my family actually did have Eurosport. So the French Open was the slam I discovered. Oh, there's tennis outside of Wimbledon. And hang on, Nadal's beating Federer. That doesn't sound right. And yeah, so I think I can't remember where I read this, but like obviously for Federer, Wimbledon was an important tournament, and understandable. It's probably one of the most recognized, if not the most recognized tennis tournament in the world. But the French was actually had an emotional significance to him as well, because that was the geographically closest. And I think he really, really wants to win that one as well, especially since he grew up playing on clay. People probably forget that because Rafa overshadowed him on the surface, but at the time he was clear. Federer was still. It was like Nadal, then Federer, and then everyone else.
Exactly.
Like Federer, clearly the second best player on the. And so it just seemed silly that he didn't have a French Open. So like you, I remember watching that 2009 final, and I was just so happy for him that he finally got it. And again, as a fan, but also like not just a Roger fan, as a tennis fan, it just felt right that he finally got it, because he worked. You don't get into 3 consecutive French Open finals without being really, really good. So he'd earned that title. And yeah, I definitely felt the emotion of that moment of, yes, he's finally got one. I didn't think it would be his only one, but that's how things worked out. And I don't think Roger would change too much about it, to be honest.
No, and that I think that's the beauty of it. And I'm so pleased he's got it, because I do think that it would change the narrative today slightly, not dramatically. He still would have won 19 majors. That would be pretty good. But I do think it does, change the narrative, whether that be for somebody like Sampras, of course. And there is something about the French Open and the clay surface that you get sort of pre-Rafa used to get a few one-time winners. Now we've got a 14-time winner, but there doesn't seem to be many half measures these days. McEnroe as well is another one on the men's side that never quite managed the red courts of Paris. I'm going to come to both of you for some final thoughts, because we have got to bring this to a close. By the way, make sure you hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel, and just get some of your little, maybe if you've got some Roger anecdotes, maybe you saw him live, or even just a particular match that really springs to mind. There's the 2009 final here from Ghost as well. I'm going to come to you both in a second. I'll probably come to Jamie, and then we'll finish with Nick on your thoughts regarding Federer from a fan's perspective. But I'm going to give you one or two from mine first, which is I'm not a Roger Federer fan, but I've seen so many people on Twitter today saying he's why I got into tennis. He's the person that really drew me to the sport. I've seen people from outside of the sport, whether it be Luka Modric tweeting just a picture of a magician and Roger Federer basically, or one of those late night guys, Conan O'Brien, just basically saying unbelievable, 24 years at the top of the game. Now it's time to turn to podcasting. I hope he doesn't infringe upon the YouTube channel thing, but maybe we could collaborate on something. So I think he transcended the sport in particular. Jamie, just give me one particular thought from you before we bring this to a sad conclusion.
Yeah, there was just a really quick anecdote, I guess, I wanted to say about him. So my granddad was actually a big Federer fan. I went with my granddad to the 07 final.
Great.
He after the 2003 final, when he won his first Wimbledon, he apparently worked with a guy who was a massive Pete Sampras fan. And when Federer beat Philippoussis and won his first Wimbledon, he had a bet with this guy at work that Roger Federer would overtake Pete Sampras.
Oh, wow.
And that was in 2003. So after his first one, I don't know if he's kind of was like a mystic Meg, but he obviously saw something.
He did, and that's a great little story. I'm really pleased about that, and I'm also pleased that obviously you got to see that '07 final with your grandfather, and your father was in '07. I know he was with you in '08.
Yeah, my dad was with me in '08 and my granddad was with me in '07.
Great, and those memories that Roger and Rafa, of course, provided to you, your grandfather, and also your father are just moments that we can all cherish forever. I'm not going to get too emotional now, Nick. Obviously, you said, you have been a fan. Now it's time to put all that fan support behind Igor, of course. But before we do that, just give me a final sort of take on Roger Federer.
Final take. I mean, we'd be here all day. If I gave you a take on Roger Federer. Unfortunately, there's going to be plenty of stuff written about him. And from everyone, mainstream media, little tennis websites like Popcorn. I wrote something on my own blog before I joined Popcorn a few months back about my fandom of Federer, and I will continue to believe that Roger Federer was the coolest, will remain the coolest tennis player that I'll have ever seen. And that's just the perfect way of describing him and his game. I actually did manage to see him play in person. I saw him play twice. It was the first, no, it was in the O2 Arena at the ATP finals when they were there in 2011 and 2012. And I couldn't tell you anything about the matches that I watched other than they went 3 sets. I don't understand how they went 3 sets against Marty Fish and then Janko Tipsarevic. Couldn't really tell you about the passion play or anything like that. But all I was doing was just watching Roger Federer because that was I was there for. And just to quickly say, if you haven't heard the best anecdote about Roger Federer probably I've heard other than Jamie's, which actually I think is on par with it. But I'm not going to tell the full story. I think you should go and ask her about it or listen to. There's an episode of Murray Musings where she talks about it. But Claire Stanley on Twitter has an incredible story where she managed to meet Roger Federer in the airport lounge in Melbourne the day after he won the Australian Open.
Oh wow!
That is so. If I think she tells the story far better than I ever could. And it is out there in recorded form. But
could you just tell us a little snippet from it, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, she was there. She goes over with her family to Australia very regularly, and so she was. I think she might have been at the final. I can't remember. You have to ask her. Okay. But so they were going to fly back, and then they were in the airport lounge, and Roger Federer was there, with his team, with his family, and Claire was there with her family and her newborn baby. So that's actually, you probably retweeted her photo earlier of her holding her newborn baby with Roger Federer standing next to him.
Yeah,
that was that day, because she went over and she just said she just planned to say congratulations on winning the Australian Open, and she just thought he'd say, "Oh, thanks very much," and then they'd move on. But then they ended up just talking until the flight took off.
Wow,
like ages. Like he actually made the time to chat to her. So, yeah, that's what I say is that's the best Federer anecdote that I was aware of before coming on the stream. But yeah, that's what I say, that he will forever be to me the coolest tennis player I've ever watched or ever will watch. Great.
And on that note, Nick, I think it's time to bring today's episode, or this episode is the second one of the day, but this particular episode regarding a fan's perspective on Roger Federer to a close. Thank you both for joining. And I'm sure we will be crossing paths again very soon. Tennis World, thank you for stopping by, and speak to you soon.